Hello students, welcome back to the channel. So in this video, we are going to study about the human respiratory system. Now see, this is the buccal cavity. Understand the diagram, I'm using the color difference. This is buccal cavity. Okay, and here this is your nasal cavity, nasal passage. Okay, and here you will see these are the external nostrils. External nostril. And this is your nasal passage. Clear na? This is your nasal passage. You will say this is nasal passage. And this will lead to the nasal chamber. I'm using the color difference just to make you understand the concept properly. This is the pharynx area. This is the pharynx area. And from the pharynx area, if you see, two tubes will be there. In the pharynx, two tubes will be there. From the pharynx, it will start. One is your windpipe, another is your food pipe. Clear? So this back is the food pipe, also known as esophagus. And this one is windpipe, also known as trachea. This part of the pharynx, which is near to the nasal cavity, okay, which is near to the nasal chamber, this part of the pharynx is known as nasopharynx. This is nasopharynx. Clear, beta? Understand very slowly, very coolly. This part of the pharynx, which is near to the oral cavity, this part is known as oropharynx. This part is known as oropharynx, which is near to the oral cavity, means buccal cavity. Clear? This much is clear? Now, if you see structure which is present, which is a modified of the trachea, this is your larynx. This is a larynx, and this larynx is having an aperture. Okay, this is larynx, which is also known as voice box. And this aperture, I'll just use this color, understand it properly. This one, this aperture is known as glottis. So to cover the glottis at the time of swallowing, this structure is present, pipe-like structure, which is known as epiglottis. Epiglottis, which is made up of elastic cartilage. The epiglottis is present. Now see carefully, this part of the pharynx, which is near to the larynx area. Clear? Which is near to the larynx area. This part of the pharynx is known as laryngopharynx. So up till here, I hope you have understood. Pharynx, three parts are there, which is near to the nasal cavity, nasopharynx, which is near to the buccal cavity, oropharynx, and which is near to the larynx is laryngopharynx. Now you see the diagram very carefully. Okay, suppose this is the food bolus. So when you are pushing the bolus into the food pipe, that time this epiglottis will close the glottis so that the food can be pushed into the food pipe. Clear? But when you are inhaling the air, I'm using blue color. So when you are inhaling the air from the nasal passage will come into the nasal chamber. From nasopharynx area, it will come into the laryngopharynx, and from glottis, it will enter into the trachea. This much sequence you have understood. So basically, up till here, what you have understood, you have studied the sequences from external nostril. The air will come into the nasal passage, and from nasal passage, it will come into the nasal chamber. And from nasal chamber, it will come into the pharynx area. And from pharynx area, through glottis, it will enter through larynx into trachea. This much I tried to explain you. Now we will see the NCERT. Now see the NCERT line carefully. We have pair of external nostril opening out above the upper lip. I think so you can imagine it also. It leads to the nasal chamber through nasal passage. It means sequences first is external nostril, clear now? Then nasal passage and then into the nasal chamber. It leads to nasal chamber through nasal passage. The nasal chamber will open into the pharynx. The fourth pharynx will come. Pharynx is an area where the food and air are mixed. The pharynx is a portion of which is common for both food and air. Now what will happen? Pharynx will open into what? Pharynx will open through larynx. Through larynx, it will open into trachea. So after pharynx will be larynx and then trachea. This much is clear. Now what is larynx? What is larynx? Larynx is a cartilaginous voice box. It is made up of cartilage. It is hyaline cartilages are there, which is thyroid cartilage, which is biggest one, single only. Cricoid cartilage is also single. Epiglottis is also single. Pair is your arytenoid and corniculate. So these are the different types of cartilages are there, which help in production of this sound with the help of vocal cord, which are of two types, true vocal cord and false vocal cord. True vocal cord is the one which help in producing sound. Because it is producing sound, we say it is a sound box. So you have to learn ki cartilaginous box, different types of cartilage. Right now only I told you ki there is thyroid cartilage, one, cricoid cartilage, also one, epiglottis is also one. Clear? But arytenoid cartilage is in pair and corniculate cartilage also is in pair. So cartilage is clear. Now it is producing sound. It means it is having vocal cord. Vocal cords are there and these vocal cords are of two types. True vocal cord which will produce sound and false vocal cord which are providing the moisture to the true vocal cord. Now, during swallowing, when we swallow that time, glottis is a aperture which is present from where the air will enter into the larynx to reach to the trachea. So glottis is covered by a thin elastic cartilage flap called epiglottis. So epiglottis is your elastic cartilage and it is thin. Why it is covering it? So that to prevent the entry of food into the larynx. Is it clear? Sequence, I hope you are understanding it. Now trachea will leads into the, up to the mid-thoracic level it will reach and it will divide into primary and secondary, primary right and left bronchi at the fifth thoracic level. Now let me explain you from diagram. See in this diagram, try to understand this is the body cavity, understand it, okay? And this is the diaphragm. So thorax, this is a trachea which is reaching to the mid-thoracic level because you know this is a thoracic cavity and down is abdomen and it will divide into right and left primary bronchi at which level of the thoracic vertebra? At the fifth level of thoracic vertebra. So you can just write down here thoracic 5. Just make your learning thoracic 5. It is dividing into primary bronchi. This is primary bronchi. Clear? Now primary bronchi will again divide into secondary bronchi. This is secondary bronchi. Second division, secondary bronchi. Now this secondary bronchi will again divide further. I'm using only on one. This is known as tertiary bronchi. So I think so up till here you are understanding that trachea will divide into primary, secondary and tertiary bronchi. I'm just writing it here. Trachea will divide into primary bronchi. Primary bronchi will branch to form secondary bronchi. And secondary bronchi will branch to form tertiary bronchi. So I think so bronchi is clear up till here. Now this tertiary bronchi will further branch. Now you check the board carefully. It will further branch to form initial bronchiole. This is initial bronchiole. Okay, this is initial bronchiole. Then it divides to form terminal bronchiole, which is dividing to form respiratory bronchiole. Respiratory bronchiole is dividing to form alveolar duct, and which is finally bearing the alveoli. This is alveoli present. So let me just write it here. What is this? This is your initial bronchiole. This is your initial bronchiole. Clear, beta? This is what? This is your terminal bronchiole. And what is this green color? This is your respiratory bronchiole. And then this is what? This is your alveolar duct. And finally, this is your alveoli. This is the way branching network is present. So let me write the sequence for you here. After tertiary bronchi, I wrote it. It is initial bronchiole. It will give rise to terminal bronchiole. Terminal bronchiole will give rise to respiratory bronchiole. Respiratory bronchiole will give rise to alveolar duct. And finally, which will be an alveoli. So we can see the sequence of the passage of air starting from external nostril. Okay, you can see starting from the external nostril. It is going to the nasal passage, then to the nasal chamber, pharynx, through the glottis entering into larynx, reaching to the trachea. Trachea is dividing at the fifth thoracic level into right and left primary bronchi. And on each side, primary bronchi will go for branching to make secondary bronchi, which divide to form tertiary bronchi. Tertiary bronchi, further branching, we will say it is giving rise to bronchioles, initial bronchiole, then terminal bronchiole, and respiratory bronchiole, which is going to give rise to alveolar duct, and finally alveoli. It means the path which starts from here. Please focus the path which starts from external nostril. Okay, which start from external nostril up to the path which is coming from trachea, primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, up to the terminal bronchiole. This path up till here. Are you getting it, beta? Up till here, what is it? This is your conducting part. This is your conducting zone. This is the conducting zone. Clear? This line is clear? Now, next, see carefully. Starting from trachea, I'm starting from trachea. Starting from trachea, okay, we have to start from trachea. I'm just writing it from here. Trachea, primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, till initial bronchiole. Up till here, they all are having C-shaped cartilaginous rings. C-shaped cartilaginous rings. This C is incomplete on the dorsal side. It is incomplete on dorsal side. So C-shaped cartilage rings are present, which starts from trachea till initial bronchiole. Respiratory bronchioles, alveolar duct and alveoli, they are the part of the respiratory zone. They are the part of the respiratory zone. So they are part of respiratory zone. So two types of zones we have to learn. One is conducting zone, is where to where, and what is respiratory zone. Clear? Now let us see the NCERT. Now see beta, trachea is a straight tube going up to the mid-thoracic cavity, which divide at the level of fifth thoracic vertebra. This only I try to explain you. It divide at the fifth thoracic vertebra into right and left primary bronchi. Each bronchi undergo division to form secondary or tertiary bronchi. And finally, they are going to make bronchioles and making terminal bronchioles. Clear till terminal bronchioles NCERT has given. Now read the line carefully. The trachea, primary, secondary, tertiary bronchi, and initial bronchiole. That is why I was trying to explain you properly. Ki here NCERT has given terminal bronchiole and here it is giving initial bronchiole. Clear? It means from trachea to initial bronchiole, check carefully, they are supported by incomplete cartilaginous rings. Supported by incomplete cartilaginous ring. Incomplete means C-shaped and incomplete towards the dorsal side. And each terminal bronchiole, see the line carefully, each terminal bronchiole give rise to number of thin irregular wall and vascular bag, that is known as alveoli. So you should know which bronchiole is first. Clear beta? So first will come initial bronchiole. Here only the student get confused. So I'm again writing it. Initial bronchiole, then will come terminal bronchiole. Clear beta? Terminal bronchiole. Then respiratory bronchiole is given in your 10th class, diagram based. Life process, respiratory bronchiole, and then will come alveolar duct and alveoli. Sequence again I'm writing, I hope you are comfortable now. Now if you see the branching network, this network of bronchi, bronchioles and alveoli, they are completely, this network is only making the lungs. And we are having two lungs which are surrounded by a double layered membrane that is known as pleura. And in between the two pleural membrane is pleural fluid present to prevent the frictionless movement. Is it clear? Outer pleura is known as parietal pleura and one which is touching the lung is known as visceral pleura. So see carefully. The outer pleural membrane is in close contact with the thoracic lining and inner pleural membrane is in contact with the lungs. Now see carefully. The part which starts from external nostril up to the terminal bronchiole is making the conducting part. Conducting part is starting from external nostril to terminal bronchiole. I'll show you the diagram once again. See the diagram. Starting from external nostril, we start from external nostril till terminal bronchiole. Which zone we are calling it? Conducting zone. Clear beta? It is known as conducting zone. See carefully now. Alveoli and their duct are making the respiratory or exchange part of the respiratory system. It means they are making the respiratory part, or also known as exchange part. Now, what is the role of the conducting zone? The conducting part will transport the air to the alveoli. Number one function, it will transport air to alveoli. Number two, it will clean the air. Number two, it will clean it from foreign particle. Number three, it will humidify the air. Means it will bring the air back to the normal, humidify the air. And number four, it will bring the air to the body temperature. These are the functions of the conducting zone. What is the function of the exchange part? Exchange part function is actually the actual site where the exchange of the gases will occur between the blood and the atmospheric air. So I think so in this video, I try to explain you only the respiratory tract. I explained you okay, how we started from external nostril till alveoli. Clear? You can see this diagram. See here, this is the epiglottis. It is a flap-like structure which is closing the glottis at the time of swallowing. If you see larynx, larynx is known as a voice box. It is a cartilaginous box. These are trachea. Trachea are having, if you see, these are the incomplete cartilaginous rings. These incomplete cartilaginous rings are also known as C-shaped cartilaginous rings. and they are incomplete towards the dorsal side. So cartilaginous rings are present from the trachea till initial bronchiole. Clear, beta? Till initial bronchiole. And finally, this is your primary bronchi, which will divide to form secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, all these things, and they are making the structure that is known as lungs, which is surrounded by two pleural membrane. Outer one is known as parietal pleura and inner is known as visceral pleura. Clear? And in between them is present pleural fluid. Pleural fluid is present to prevent the frictionless movement. And if you see this structure is known as alveoli. This is alveoli where the actual gaseous exchange will occur. And lungs are present in the thoracic cavity, and the thoracic and abdomen is distinguished by the presence of partition that is known as diaphragm. So I hope so. This video has helped you to learn the topic line to line, word to word, NCERT. I tried to cover it. Thanks for watching it.